Each of us is willing to make the sacrifices a hero needs to make, even the ultimate one.
I consider myself one of the luckiest guys in the business for having the opportunity to work with this entire career of DC characters, all kind of culminating with Justice League.
What's to stop history from repeating itself right here on Earth?
We are.
These were interesting characters in their own right, and they spark against each other in interesting ways.
We love to see that when a group of disparate people somehow manage to work together for the duration.
We didn't go in thinking we were going to make the best superhero show ever, but toward the end we realized, we may have made the best superhero show ever.
I think if we look back at the Hanna-Barbera and the Filmation superhero shows, that we look at them today and we go, isn't that quaint, isn't that old-fashioned? And yet, at the time, they were not that far from where the comic books were maybe 10 years before that.
The Justice League was sort of the Kiwanis Club. And it was 7 guys and Wonder Woman, who was literally their secretary. And they all agreed on everything, and they were all hail fellows, well met, and they got along perfectly, and they were really powerful, and the villains didn't have a chance.
Teams in the early days had a cobblestone quality. It wasn't so much a matter of pitting the characters against each other in their personalities originally.
You couldn't have conflict at television at that time, so they had to fight natural disasters. And everything had to be nice and friendly and kind.
When you're a kid, you don't know anything about how do adults relate to each other. It's comforting, it's reassuring to see that everybody gets along.
They wouldn't use the real villains from the comics. That bugged me as a kid. I'd rather read the comics than watch the cartoons.
So when we started looking at doing Justice League, we wanted to try and be sort of more true to where the comic books had come since that time.
We were all supercharged with enthusiasm for the show and the possibilities of what we could do in a superhero show.
Comics are more respected. Standards and practices understand that you need drama, conflict.
We wanted to stick with the main big 7 of the Justice League.
And it was important for us to find unique voices for all of the heroes.
We really wanted to mix it up with some tension amongst the team. We had already established that Superman and Batman had tension, and then there were these new characters that had to come in. And so we defined them by types. Green Lantern was the no-nonsense military guy. Flash was kind of the slacker, laid-back dude. Wonder Woman was a princess, newly arrived, who didn't really know the norms of the world, whereas Hawkgirl was knowledgeable about things that Wonder Woman had no idea about. John Jones was the ultimate outsider. It was about them learning how to deal with each other and learn how to work together as a team.
I think it was cool that, no, they didn't pretend that they liked each other. They didn't pretend that they agreed with one another.
You know something, Bruce? You're not always right.
Character is conflict, and so if you've got a team where all of the characters agree with each other all the time, you're going to have a pretty boring show.
I think it's more interesting to see people who don't agree come together for a larger purpose than to see people who absolutely agree on everything. As much fun as the old stuff was, I think we had a little bit more fun.
The original concept for Unlimited was that it was going to be kind of like a cross between like an ongoing team show, like like the first 2 seasons of Justice League, but also kind of like a weird backdoor pilot anthology. We were going to be bringing these other characters, and the shows would be theoretically more about the guest stars.
We ended up getting deeper into the characters in the half-hour pieces than we did in the original series.
It's important to have all these different characters because it creates a reality that's separate from our own reality. We have to believe that there's a world where there are all these different kind of colorful costume characters who interact with each other.
The B-level characters, I think, are kind of more interesting. We can sort of have a little bit of license with the characters to do what we want with them.
When you start bringing characters like the Question or Vixen or Huntress, We had no idea how they interacted.
Once we realized we had 2 full seasons of shows that we could do, and we had this huge cast, we could kind of create like this big mega plot.
The world was not just contained to the superheroes. You could bring in characters like Amanda Waller, who is ostensibly a good character, but she does some really vile things to accomplish her needs.
You really think we can do something with this?
We did an entire story that was told from the point of view of the bad guys, where we realized, hey, every time Cadmus does something against the Justice League wins. So that means Cadmus is just really not that credible a threat anymore. So we needed to have Cadmus come in and win in one episode.
Listen to me. We've got one advantage. This tower's so big and there's so much staff on it, no one's going to notice us. Unless one of you does something stupid.
We treated our villains as if they were the good guys, and we treated the Justice League as if they were like these unknowable, godlike beings up in this watchtower in space.
You've got to have somebody monitoring them to see that they're not really bent on world domination or they've got some villainous plot of their own. And yet, by trying to monitor them, they become the bad guys.
Somebody's got to do something about this.
Do your stockholders know about this, Bruce? A line item hidden in the aerospace R&D budget.
When we first started Justice League, our first self-imposed rule that we gave ourselves was that we didn't want to rely too much on the continuity of our previous series, Batman and Superman.
And as we did more shows, it became clear that it was a universe.
By the time we got to Justice League Unlimited, we were just thinking back and said, we've had several secret organizations in both Superman and Batman. We realized, hey, what if every one of those secret organizations that we'd had before, what if they're all part of the same secret organization?
How do we deal with the things that we messed up and manage to sweep them under the rug or justify them?
The nice thing about the Justice League animated series is it has the benefit of that would-be cohesion and that understanding that you're trying to create a coherent world.
We started deliberately trying to tie all this stuff together into this one big massive climactic story that was going to put a big exclamation point at the end of the sentence of the DC universe.
We knew with Justice League that we wanted to touch on several famous stories from the DC comic books, and one of them was for the man who had everything. The idea of Superman living in a fantasy world.
Daddy. I promise you, I'll never forget.
We knew we wanted to adapt that for 2 reasons. We had introduced Mongol in Justice League, and we knew he had a mad-on for Superman. And we also wanted to do the Trinity idea of Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman teaming up. So this was a perfect story to adapt, so we really stuck close to it.
But I think this is yours.
I think my favorite episode to write was the Christmas episode where Superman kind of takes pity on John Jones and takes him back to Smallville with him for the holidays.
Kitty.
It really was like doing another episode of the Superman series because we had the same voice cast doing Ma and Pa Kent, the same house, but it just felt like, going home a little bit. You were able to keep a lot of the same creative threads running from show to show, particularly in regards to character continuity. You could take a character such as Orion that showed up in Superman and then really play him out and give him a greater role in Justice League.
Talk while you still have a jaw.
In the Batman story that features the demon, it's a story that really is focused on trying to convince the audience that magic can happen in Batman's world. By the time we get to Justice League, that work has already been done, and so then we can do a story that focuses on who the demon is and what his story is.
Using all of those worlds to make our world seem bigger and more real. So when you saw an adventure, you realize these characters had lives outside of the few minutes that we saw in each episode.
Then you got somebody like Supergirl who's just trying to prove herself, and get out from under her cousin's shadow.
The innocent from another world who doesn't know her way around to a contemporary teenager to a grown-up woman who's ready to leave and do her own life.
That makes for a lot of really cool dynamics. In some cases, I want to see those stories more than I want to see them going out and beating up Felix Faust or the Parasite again.
When they leave the story for a while and come back, there was always growth. There was always something that had happened in their lives that affected where we are now.
Working with the cast of Justice League was terrific because if you ever had a favorite character in the DC universe, you got to use them.
Whenever we adapt a character from the comics into the animation, you know, we try to stay true to at least to the intent of the character.
You want to reproduce the essence of what people are interested in and what the fans are interested in about that character and make it visible to someone who hasn't read all the comic books.
A lot of the characters in the DC comics came from the 40s and 50s, and so when we looked at trying to introduce them to a new audience, we had to find ways to make them relevant.
I've got 60 years of Green Arrow incarnations to look at and to pick and choose what I want that helps serve the story I'm telling now.
This is somebody from a comic book you've been reading your entire life, and you can have them come in and do something that's very much like that character, and then you move on, and it makes it feel much richer.
It was also a chance to take characters who had never appeared in animation before and really give them a larger presence, a bit more stature.
The difficulty in adapting those never before adapted characters is usually tone.
Say something. Preemptive strike.
Our Hawk and Dove, is it comedic or what? And it requires a lot of creativity on the part of the writers to make them come to life.
The main benefit to the characters that haven't appeared many times in movies and other TV shows is that people don't have as fixed an image.
Everybody knows Wonder Woman, Superman, The Flash, Batman. Not so many people know Hawk and Dove, the Vigilante, Vixen.
You have to look at the character and figure out, okay, what is specific to Mr. Terrific? What are the elements that are Mr. Terrific? How best can we present them?
If they had their own show, what they would be doing on that show.
A character like Green Arrow, he's straight up out of the comics. His look, he's got the Neil Adams costume, he's got, you know, the left-wing liberal, you know, sensibility.
I know he actually talks about being a lefty.
The government must do for people what people can't do for themselves.
Who does that? What comic character, what cartoon character has ever admitted to have left-leaning philosophy?
I just helped the little guy. At a big club like this, you tend to forget all about him.
He's the swashbuckler, he's also the womanizer, you know, I mean, he's straight up Ollie Queen out of the comics.
Back off, nuke boy!
Captain Atom, he gets his authority from the military. And if the military is against the Justice League, then he's against the Justice League.
Some of the more obscure characters, they're dropped in to flavor certain episodes, and yet in some cases they really catch on with an audience. Like, I know The Question really became a great character.
I had no idea that the Girl Scouts were responsible for the crop circle phenomenon.
Few people do. Few even think to ask the question.
To get the appeal of the question, you have to almost write a parody of the question and then pull it back a couple steps.
You're lucky to have me along.
Hardly. You're drawn to my eccentric charm.
Our version of the question is influenced by Ditko's original character.
He's a wonderful contrast to the entire league because he has no face, he has no powers, but really what he has is a mind and a point of view, and that's his power, and it's amazing.
In the comics, a character like the Question would never ever be in the Justice League, but that was just like this weird conceit we had. Literally any DC hero could be drafted into the Justice League because, you know, it's like, hey, if we need you, we'll call you. Wanna Beast? Be ready.
Wanna Beast? Oh, for crying out loud. I didn't even grow up with the character. I'd seen ads for it when I was a kid, but I was always intrigued by this thing.
He's nothing like the character in the comics because the character in the comics is probably the weirdest character the DC ever came up with.
He was fun for an episode. He just added a little bit to it. I don't know if we're going to see the Wanna Beast series.
A lot of the guys we chose were frankly just red shirts. They're just guys to walk through in the background sometimes when we need a crowd scene of superhero characters. Some of them never even open their mouths.
Aztec. I'm sorry, I'm not a fan. I don't know Aztec. But in a way, we didn't abuse the character by doing him incorrectly either.
The Wall's submolecular integrity has been compromised.
We tried to pick characters who were visually interesting. We wanted to break up the silhouettes of them so they weren't all just guys in spandex. Vigilante's a really good case in point. He's a character that even if you know nothing about the comics or you've never read a character that had the Vigilante in before, the minute you see him, you get him. He's a cowboy guy who rides a motorcycle. Done. Same thing with the Shining Knight. Okay, he's a knight. He's a guy in golden armor with a sword. It's like, okay, you get it, you know?
Logically, characters like Green Lantern or Superman probably should not be interacting with characters like Green Arrow, because characters like Green Arrow are very likely to be inadvertently killed. But they work so well in the team structure.
You introduce an element of humanity to the concept of superheroes, and it provides a touchstone for the audience.
They provide characters that can serve as the unpretentious contrast, sometimes the conscience of other characters. Sometimes it's comic relief. Sometimes it's that gruff, scrappy kind of quality that we long to see and that by nature Superman or Wonder Woman do not exhibit.
Certainly Superman wanted them there, and Batman wanted to be there to keep these godlike characters from losing touch with the people that they had sworn to protect.
The challenge of Justice League is how to justify getting a group of people together with their own ideologies, their own philosophies, and they don't really fight well, play well with others. So you create a threat, a world threat, a cataclysm that's so great that there's no excuse. These people have to get together to fight.
In the end, we did make a really great superhero show that is bigger than the sum of its parts.
We love comics, we love the characters, and we feel an incredible responsibility to present them in the best way that we know how.
Millions more people will see these characters because of the animation than would ever have known about them just from comic books.
It's about more than just superheroes. It's not just a cartoon, it's an animated story, but it's universal in its appeal.
Hopefully we were able to turn a whole new generation on to these classic characters.